Hey everyone, Tony D with another lamp video on the recent events surrounding Andy No and his assault. It's a little complicated. It's not just the assault, but also the reaction to said assault. Before we get into it, smash like and subscribe. Thank you for smash liking and subscribing. Please check out my books, Wokistan, a novel, Hollywoke, another novel, both political satire, including stuff about Antifa, and of course the Pineys, books 1 through 6. Book 7 coming this summer, comedy horror in South Jersey. Now, also don't forget to go to Bitchute and Rumble for the other 2 videos today. We got the news blast and a thing on CRT, which is why I got to be careful because I know this one's going on YouTube. So Andy No. Andy No, for those of you who are out of the loop or don't watch my videos, I use Andy No's Twitter feed a lot for my talks on Antifa, because Andy is the expert. I mean, he's the expert on the Antifa, whatever you want to call it, phenomenon, organization, whatever. I would call it more of a gang, more of a club, but I would compare it as, if I had to compare it closely to criminal organizations, I would say it's probably not as close to the ethnic sort of organized crime families like mafia or triads or whatever. It's probably a little closer to motorcycle clubs, in that the people who will eventually be in what will become the Antifa criminal organizations, it's hard for them to grow up around that unless their parents are in the lifestyle, and it's more of a lifestyle choice. Whereas people in, for instance, the triads, you grow up in Chinese culture and that culture overlaps with the criminal organization. It's just that the criminals tend to recruit from the most ruthless and poorest rungs of their societies. So there are more people to recruit from in criminal organizations like the triads or the mafia or the yakuza, whereas in Antifa you need a group of people who are already communist or proto-communist or socialist or very left-leaning to recruit into your organization. So what does this all have to do with Andy? Well, Andy is a reporter. He's reported on Antifa for a long time. He wrote a book, a best-selling book about the subject, and he eventually moved out of Portland, where he was based, because it got so hot and heavy for him that he had to leave. So the rumor is he's living in England, but that may be a temporary situation. I don't know. He's trying to stay on the down low. But recently he came back, and he came back. He was doing some reporting on Antifa by infiltrating Antifa, wearing the black bloc and the mask, and they caught him somehow, unmasked him, chased him down the street, tackled him, assaulted him multiple times. He eventually managed to get inside a hotel called the Nines, where he begged the staff to help him. They were sort of helpful. Really, what Andy should have done at that moment is probably what I would have done, which is, you're not going to help me? Give me a hotel room right now. They can't refuse a customer, but they might have. Who knows? So Andy had to basically sit in the lobby and beg these people to call the cops for him. I'm not sure why Andy couldn't. He may have lost his phone or may have been assaulted. And broke his phone or whatever in the middle of the assault. So he got in there. He was all banged up. The Antifa guys had chased him there. Some of them tried to go into the hotel. They ended up outside. Eventually, the police did come, and they took Andy in an ambulance to the hospital to get checked out. And they basically saved them. Better late than never, I guess. So for a few days, we didn't hear from Andy. And at first, we weren't even sure it really was Andy No, because the Antifa guys are so incredibly racist. They've been attacking random Asian guys in Portland for a while, mistaking them for Andy No. And this has happened so many times. They've actually caught a few of these on on video. You can look them up. They're very racist. The Antifa guys they're all a bunch of friggin' racists. Anyhow, so eventually Andy announced what had happened to him and made another round on Fox News and whatnot. And so confirmed that, yes, it was him. He'd been assaulted and reported on his own assault. And Tim Pool, I guess this was yesterday, came out with a tweet, which was kind of surprising coming from Tim. You know, he's a journalist and he's been out in the field. But he basically implied that Andy going back into the field to cover Antifa the way he did was unsafe, it was stupid, it was reality TV. I think that's a little bit strong. I wouldn't describe it as that. I understand what Tim's concern is. Tim is, you got to be smart if you're going into an area where you could be targeted. And that Andy is kind of too famous, and even the Lotus Eaters agreed partly with this. Andy's a little too famous to be out there in the field. But here's where I kind of disagree with them. While, yes, number one, he should take precautions. And as Jeremy points out in the quartering, these guys, they don't know if he did take precautions. He might have taken great precautions. He might have had people with him. He doesn't want to expose them. He's trying to keep them quiet. He doesn't want them to get undue attention because maybe they live in Portland. So he may have had a perfectly solid plan that went awry or for whatever reason. That all being said, here's my take on it. I think Andy, and he said this in a tweet, that he had to go back to Portland to care for his elderly parents, who still live in Portland. So this is a real problem for him. This isn't like Tim Pool in Tahrir Square, where Tim doesn't live in Egypt, right? He doesn't live in Egypt. He doesn't live in these places. Tim lived in Chicago. He's from Chicago originally, I think. But, you know, he's more the kind of person who's lived all over the world. And he doesn't really have a hometown like Andy does. And I can relate to Andy because I like South Jersey. This is where I want to stay. This is where I want to be. I don't want to be anywhere else. And if I were Andy, I'd have the same sort of feelings about South Jersey. I'd want to stay and defend my home, defend my parents. You can't leave family behind. So that is a huge factor. And imagine this too, even if Andy had come to Portland with the intent on not doing any reporting and just to take care of his parents and do whatever he needs to do, you know, he has an obligation as a guy who's been reporting on this to report on it, right? I mean, so imagine you're the guy who covers Antifa in Portland and you're there the weekend some big story breaks and you're barely covering it. You're covering it from some guy who you're using as a, you know, stringer or whatever. It doesn't look good. It undermines your credibility, I think, as a journalist somewhat. You know, this is what he does. He's trying to save Portland. And when you think about what journalists really do is they expose the truth for the benefit of the public. I mean, that's what they're really supposed to do, right? So, you know, Tim's criticism was a little harsh considering that some people have to be exposed. Antifa has to be exposed. And Antifa now is, 20 years from now, Antifa, if it's continued to metastasize across the United States, they will be way more powerful. Way more powerful. And rather than being mad at Andy, no, I think the true culprit here is number one, Ted Wheeler. Ted Wheeler, the mayor of Portland and the police commissioner of Portland, he is to blame. He has allowed this to metastasize. He's so untrustworthy. You know, in another city, a reporter like Andy might have had the cops go along with him. Might have had some at least wink and a nod to the cops. I'm going out here, keep an eye on me kind of thing. Because there would have been an idea that, yeah, we're all in this together kind of thing. Even though reporters are they're kind of on their own. They're separate. They can't be trusted. I mean, police can't be trusted, especially in a town like Portland with a mayor like Ted Wheeler. Ted Wheeler is number one to blame for this. That Ted Wheeler, who asked people of his own city to write down information about Antifa, to write down license plate numbers. Here is a guy, Andy No, an expert in Antifa, a guy who wrote a book on Antifa, a best-selling book, and who's been assaulted by Antifa. You can't ask for a better expert. You can't ask for a better witness and victim, unfortunately. So you arrest these a-holes, they're going to jail, because Andy will get up on the stand and he'll refute anything the defense tries to throw at him. Because Andy is a guy who's an expert in this. He is a recognized expert in Antifa. They have absolutely no business attacking him. And the only line of defense a defense attorney for the Antifa guys could take is, well, you're a right-wing lunatic, Antifa isn't a real thing, and good luck. Good luck selling that to a Portland jury. So Ted Wheeler is, as always, an idiot. He should have sent a massive amount of cops to the nines. He should have scooped up every member of Antifa who was outside and arrested them. And then, while they're being processed, go through that security footage, find the woman who walked in and threatened him, find the people who are banging on the windows, and arrest them. And investigate those who assaulted Andy, of course, and those would be number one. Now, Andy, I think, knows who did it. I believe he pointed them out. And Andy has other police reports with the Portland police that have, according to him, gone unprosecuted. These people aren't investigating anything. They're not arresting anyone. That's the problem. Andy did what a reporter does, and these people are assaulting him. The answer is not to go, well, I guess I can't go there. Well, if everybody takes that attitude, you might as well just abandon Portland and put a wall around it. I don't think that's what Tim meant, though. I mean, I think he's just saying Andy should have been smarter about his security, and he really sort of went a little too far here. I don't think Andy's making the story about himself. Far from it. Andy is, I think he's from Portland. He certainly grew up there, or lived there with his parents. He has an obligation to help them and help his community. He can't abandon them unless he gets them out of there, which maybe he's trying to do, I don't know, but I mean, those are his parents. If they've lived there most of their lives, they're not going to want to leave Portland. Even as it collapses around them, they're going to want to stick it out. He may have thought by leaving he'd be in a better shape. And who knows, maybe he slightly is. But at the end of the day, this all goes back to Ted Wheeler running the city into the ground and not running things properly. Not sending out these cops. These guys should have been prosecuted unbelievably. He should devote cops to making sure they send a strong message to Antifa. If you so much as look sideways at a journalist, we're going to crawl up your ass with a microscope, and then we're going to find out everything about you, and you're going to go to jail for doing anything. But my take on that is Ted Wheeler is an idiot and doesn't realize that his entire prosecutorial teams are in the bag for the opposition. They're in the bag for Antifa. They're all angling for a city council position or his position as mayor and police commissioner. So they don't care. They're trying to say, don't prosecute these guys. Vote for me in November. So he's got a real problem on his hands. What Ted really needs to do now, and now he can't do it. He could have done it with Trump, but he can't do it with Biden. See, he needs to get the FBI in and clean house. He needs to get rid of every prosecutor with a tie to Antifa. They should be declared a terrorist organization, especially in the state of Oregon, especially there. They are in New Jersey, and we don't have as many problems. If they did that in Oregon, you'd watch. Oh, their tone would suddenly change. They'd suddenly be very peaceful. Yeah. If they prosecuted people and did that overnight, you would see their attitude change. They'd be forced to change their tactics. in order not to get lengthy prison sentences. Eventually, someone would not care and go to prison. But, and that's the problem with allowing this stuff to go on and on and on. What Ted is doing is he is birthing a new sort of criminal organization, probably closer to the white supremacist gangs that you saw dominate prison. These white power gangs are vicious. They're vicious because they are low in number, and when you don't have the guys, you have to be extra vicious so nobody messes with you. And these guys have tendrils outside of the prison. They're so powerful. They've become so powerful. The same thing could happen with Antifa if this is allowed to continue on and on and on, because you will see guys who go to prison and become hardened by the prison life. They will have no other alternative but to stay in the criminal lifestyle. Now they'll be self-righteous and say, well, I'm here to smash the state and I'm a communist and blah, blah, blah. But until that happens, I need to be a criminal and I need to rob these people and do all these horrible things in order to keep the thing going. And that's exactly how the mafia, the triads, the Yakuza, all your criminal organizations started. The triads started as a resistance movement to the people who got rid of the Ming emperors. They wanted to put the Mings back on the throne. Well, when the Mings died out, and that was like, gosh, it was hundreds of years ago. It was like over 500 years ago, I think. They still continued as an organization, and they became more and more criminal. Now, if by some miracle they found one of the Mings, I don't think the triads would suddenly drop their criminal enterprise to try to reinstate the emperor in China. Not that they could currently, but they are a criminal organization that's here to stay. Same thing with Antifa, if you allow this to continue. Once you have several generations of these people, it becomes a lifestyle that they are born into and live their entire lives. If you grow up in this Antifa communist household, thankfully these guys are collectivists and don't believe in traditional nuclear families. That's the one saving grace. It occurred to me today that, this may not last very long. As the racist gangs died out, as the white supremacist gangs are dying out, so too will the Antifa gangs eventually. They may not even get going. They may not have a big enough concentration of them anywhere else other than Portland, and they may die out rather quickly over the next 2 decades. But Ted Wheeler ain't helping. No one's helping here. Wheeler, arrest these idiots.